This is Raw Mike Richards. We are on location here at Hockley Valley in support of Epilepsy Canada and Jay Barker and Aiden's Drive. Like we were last year, we're so pleased to be here. Brought to you by DKI Canada. Myself and Dave have made the journey to Mono, Ontario. Actually, we're in Mono.
Yeah.
Have you had Mono?
Clever word, eh?
Have you had
No, never. No.
Had it twice.
Did you?
Had it twice.
How'd that happen?
Well, there was this girl in Regina. See, there's never a good story that starts out with, you know, I met this girl in Regina. Never.
It's true.
By the way, I'm saying Regina. Take it easy out there. I know people are being creepy.
Yeah, best part of Regina is leaving it. So.
Behind us, the gorgeous pool. The resort is just, it's, I don't know if you call it 5-star, 3 Michelin stars, whatever it is. If you haven't been here, there's so much to do. Obviously, we're going to play golf here in the summertime, but they have a beautiful facility year-round and a winery. Adamo is just up the road here, part of the resort. It's just simply spectacular. We could not pick a better place nor a better day for Aiden's Drive, and that tells us that Jay Barker, who the other day was bragging on Twitter about how much he knows about soccer, said, "Sorry, boys, I know my sports." Do you know your sports, Jay? Do you really?
I do know my sports, but if you remember what I wrote, because I was in third place, I had to make some big, bold picks. Otherwise, I was going to stay the same if I picked the same as everyone else, and my bold picks in the round of 16 didn't quite pay off.
Look, that's a big category when it comes to the World Cup this year, and I don't think anyone's doing a lot of bragging in our blade tape extravaganza World Cup pool. But we're here today, another gorgeous day in support, really the genesis. If you haven't seen last year's or this is the first time you're hearing about our fantastic relationship with Epilepsy Canada, why don't you explain to the people who are watching for the first time, who are listening for the first time, exactly why we're here today?
Sure. We're actually here to raise funds for epilepsy research. 2.5 years ago, my son Aiden, who our event is named after, Aiden's Drive to End Epilepsy, was diagnosed with epilepsy. I found him in his crib having a major seizure. At the time, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was going on, and 4 short days later, he was diagnosed with epilepsy. So, as a parent, you know, as you guys know, being parents, I couldn't just sit around and do nothing. I did lots of research on epilepsy, met with neurologists, and I had to jump in and do something. So that's why we're here last year, and that's why we're here today, to raise funds for research, because currently there isn't a cure for the 360,000 Canadians who live with it.
How is Aiden doing as we speak? Because we know he's here.
Yeah, he's here today. Wasn't here last year. He's here today.
Last year, exactly.
Yep.
And he's pretty excited to be here. So we'll probably get a sighting of him sometime. But
yep.
How is he doing overall? Enjoying his summer? It's early July, and this is the kid's kind of year, the kid's kind of season.
Absolutely. Well, he's a little crusty as shit right now because I think he's hungry and tired. But I'm sure you'll get to see that a little bit later. He's doing okay. I don't know if you remember at last year's dinner, I had reported he was 6 months seizure free. Unfortunately, that was not the case. He started junior kindergarten this year, became very sick over a long stretch of period, and had lots of seizures. So we've been experimenting with lots of drugs. We now have him on CBD oil from cannabis. Since starting that 2.5 months ago, he hasn't had any major seizures. He's had some minor ones, but it's experiment with medicine and CBD each and every day. He grows, so we have to adjust, and we haven't had it under control yet, so we're working through it.
Well, it's interesting. We had Alan Park on about a year ago when we first started hearing about, the rendering down of this cannabis oil. And you know what? I never thought about the application in terms of anything beyond, at this point, this was cancer researchers, was medication for relief for cancer patients, but it has evolved into something that you're trying as they like to say, a cocktail to try to figure out a combination for your son. I had no idea that was part of it.
Absolutely. So actually back in the 1930s, it was used to treat epilepsy. And because hemp was a far superior product to cotton, they had cannabis banned, and they went to the Federal Bureau to get it on the narcotics list, and so on and so forth. It became one of the banned and illegal substances. But back in the day, cannabidiol was used to treat many things. Now they use it to treat PTSD, epilepsy, certain strings of cancer, a whole multitude of things, and you have to go through a very rigorous process to get it approved through the government now. But I mean, I got to do what I got to do. So I met with my son's neurologist. Finally, after a couple-hour interview, got the referral letter that I needed. Went to downtown Toronto with my son. Had an appointment there, and we were able to get the prescription.
You're watching Raw Mike Richards today on remote at Hockley Valley in support of Epilepsy Canada. We're talking with Jay Barker. His son Aiden is the reason the tournament is called Aiden's Drive. And you know, as Dave and I are sitting here listening now, my little one is a big one. He's 28, but it doesn't mean that at some point, we didn't go through some, as they say, trials and tribulations when your boy is not doing well, or your girls. But you know what? That compared to what you're talking about, I really think the thing that always strikes me about you, Jay, is that what you and your wife and the entire family goes through is got to be so strenuous. It's hardly a stress-free life, and yet you've still found time to not just, quite honestly, feel sorry for yourself. I think that'd be very easy to fall into that category. Look at everything that we have to deal with. Someone please help us. You've gone the other way. You've literally gone on the offensive and said, okay, it stops here, which is one of the reasons for the tournament. But your daily routine, I would suggest, and I want to get this across to people, can't be the easiest existence. So in a week's time, just give us an example of what a week is like with Aiden and what you deal with, and the travel included. Yep.
So every morning I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning so that I can get a head start on working on the tournament. So I essentially go into work early, and the first hour of my day I devote to try and get sponsors, get donations, just working on the overall event. Then I go into my work day, and then when I get home, usually 6, 7 o'clock at night, I spend the rest of the night with Aiden. I can tell you that I probably haven't slept well in 2.5 years. Most of Aiden's seizures happen either when he is sleeping or first thing in the morning. So anytime he moves, anytime he rolls around in bed, he actually sleeps with us because, his seizures are quiet. He can't tell us when he has the seizures because he's also autistic. So it's anytime he moves at night, you're up at the blink of an eye. And, like I said, I haven't slept in probably 2.5 years.
And I just hope that tournaments like this, the knowledge that people are learning about it, things start to improve, and you're obviously a big force behind that. Just looking around at some of, sorry, getting a little choked up here. Just looking around at how much bigger this has gotten in year number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe talk about the emphasis of how, not how much easier it is to get sponsored, because it's never easy getting a sponsor, but how much awareness you've created that sponsors are starting to come to you and say, I want on board on this, because this is only year 2, but you look around, you look at the prize table, you look at the guests, you look at how fast everything was sold out. You would think you were in your 20th year the way you've organized this, Jay, and I got to commend you for that. Can you maybe talk about how much, not easier, I don't think easier is the right word, but how much you're getting used to the organization of such a difficult event?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key was, and I had the mindset right from the get-go, that our first year had to be big, it had to be good, and it had to be impressive. And I mean, that was all possible by having you guys here and having certain sponsors on board. By doing it right in the first year, we have a 90% return rate on our sponsors, and people have wanted to come back. People have heard about it. The word has gotten out through you guys, and it was sold out relatively quickly. We have 18 sponsors this year, so every hole has a sponsor. It was so important to do it big that first year, and then this year is I don't even think I'm sweating right now, which I profusely sweat like a pig. So, it's this year has been, I wouldn't say significantly easier, but it has been easier for sure.
Well, Jay, we look forward to a great day and probably a lot of swearing on the golf course. Last time I played was this tournament last year, and I plan on drinking heavily, really heavily, like even Irish people are going, "God, that guy's brilliant," like that kind of drinking. So, but and again, we're thrilled that you think that this much of us that we can participate, because I mean, we still want to do better. I mean, we still feel like we need to contribute more and get the word out and help out any way we can, because it is just so worthwhile. Your family's fantastic. And speaking of your family, ¿dónde está tu esposa?
Yo no sé.
And he just said he doesn't know. There's bad sign number one.
No,
Where's my wife?
No, she's actually down manning the putting contest.
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent.
Keep her as far away from you as possible.
And here is la abuela.
I know.
Esta abuela aquí.
Sí.
So her.
Ella está cuidando el niño, mi hijo.
Well, see, look at that. How about that, yard dog speaking Spanish? He barely speaks English, so I don't know what the hell I'm talking to him for. Yard Dog's here, by the way, another great supporter, and so's Coach Frank. Coach Frank is
Big
here.
Coach Frank.
So the Portuguese and both the Italian Mafia represented here today at Hockley Valley. When we come back on the other side, we're going to talk to Gary Collins. He is the president of Epilepsy Canada. Always a great story, and we'll do that next. Welcome back. Here we are once again at Hockley Valley. It is the Aiden Drive Golf Tournament, Epilepsy Canada, here at Hockley Valley, which is just perfect. They do such a great job, and as you can see behind us, I feel like we're like one of those real shows, like Regis or something.
Not good. Eh?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, I'm in. Yeah, sure.
We're here at Hockley Valley because they invited us. The president, Gary Collins, who we met just a little over a year ago, and to be honest, it's one of the reasons why we continue to do this, because he is an excellent man and a Leaf fan too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before actually we continue on, Dave, they said there's some breaking news in the NHL, and someone just made a little bit more money.
Yeah, a little bit more cash. Breaking news from the Canada Pure Coach Frank Sports Desk. You like that?
Yeah, I like
little
that.
extra sponsorship there. Nikita Kucherov officially signed on 8-year extension, around $9.5 million on average, which you're looking at a guy that's going to challenge for the Art Ross Trophy, Hart Trophy, for sure for the next 5-6 years. Got him at a decent price based on today's NHL, because when McDavid's making 12, 13, whatever it is, Tavares is making 11. You're getting this guy at 9.5. 9.5 is a great value for the common man, but in the NHL, a little bit of a discount for Steve Yzerman and the Tampa Bay Lightning.
So you think is he a tier below, or is he in the same tier for you?
Same tier.
Okay.
Same tier. If you're selecting, and we have about 10 friends around this table right now, and we're having the first round of the NHL fantasy draft, Nikita Kucherov's probably going in the top 5. And if you don't go in the top 5, then I want to play each and every one of you, because you do not know as much as I do. So, no, great deal for Tampa Bay. And 8 years, at great extension. Him and Steven Stamkos have an awesome chemistry. Maybe the best line in hockey last year. And we'll see what they could do about Erik Karlsson, which would make this team even that much better. And probably the odds-on favorite to win a Stanley Cup if you could get a defenseman of that caliber into a lineup that already has a Victor Hedman, which is just an embarrassment of riches. We'll have to see, but good news for Tampa Bay if you are a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, which we're not.
Or Montreal Canadian fans. For instance, if there happened to be one out there in the audience, I would say, c'est dommage. I believe that's how it's said. Yeah. Hey, that was French clapping too. Yeah, people say, yeah, French clap. I've heard of that. It's not. We're not going that way this year. It's a new and improved show. No, it's not. Gary's going, since when? Since when did that happen? Gary, president of Epilepsy Canada. Here's a tournament that it was a first start last year, and this year it's I don't know. I'm not going to say it's twice the size, but man, oh man, you've done well here today, and we haven't even started yet.
No, thanks, Mike and Dave. Thanks very much for having me on again. Great show. Great to have your sponsorship with us. We really appreciate that. No, a significant thing I want to talk about first is Jay. This man is so dedicated. He's such an ambassador for Epilepsy Canada. You heard his story about his life with Aiden and what that entails. It's mind-boggling as to what he has to endure during weeks. So just as alone his family life and taking care of Aiden, maybe people don't realize this, Jay spends about 700 hours a year to pull this tournament away. So he works full-time at Air Canada, and yet in addition to that, he adds 700 hours to pull this tournament off to raise great money for epilepsy research. Last year, we raised $80,000. Coming into today, before we even start today, we're at $89,000.
Oh,
Amazing,
fantastic.
amazing.
So we're going to go over $100,000 mark today with a good push, and so we're very, very excited.
Well, you talked about Jay, and we got into it a little bit about what his life is kind of like, and I know he's holding back a little bit, and the reason is he's humble and he doesn't want to sit there and have a pity party. In fact, he's quite the opposite of that. But at the same time, when we start talking about epilepsy, it's not just the one thing that affects one person. If epilepsy is in your family, well, you know how it affects the entire family, the entire schedule. Your life all of a sudden is completely changed because you need to have that awareness of just what epilepsy can do to that person physically. But again, it's the ramifications of how it affects an entire family.
Correct. And one of the things that Jay didn't talk about was this year they had tried to plan a family vacation to go south. And in the end, Aiden had another seizure, and they had to pull back. So Mariah and his daughter went south on the vacation, and Jay stayed at home with Aiden. So talk about the fact that they couldn't even get away. Jay didn't want Aiden on a plane and having a seizure midair, or at the other end, not having the facilities that he could have to take care of Aiden in an emergency situation. So that's, again, another side effect, that the family can't even vacation because they're unsure as to when. You can't plan around it, when and if, because a seizure can happen anytime, anywhere. And so that greatly affects his life and their life together. So Mike, you're right. It isn't the person just living with epilepsy. It's the family members around them and that impact. So the other part is, what about Jay's daughter? He spends as much time as he can with her, but it in fact affects the family unit in a different kind of way.
Yeah, it certainly does, and you know a lot about it too, Gary, living with it, and maybe talk about your background with Epilepsy Canada, and how you came to be the person you are, heading up such a worthy charity, and the great work you do as well.
Well, thanks, Dave, very much. Yes, I was diagnosed late in life at 30, unexpectedly with seizures, and I'm one of the fortunate few. So the raw numbers are 360,000 Canadians live with epilepsy today. 70% of us, our seizures are mostly controlled, and I'll say mostly, because they're not completely controlled through medication. And then 30%, like Aiden, are intractable. Seizures can happen anytime. Medication doesn't solve the problem. And then 2% die, which is an unknown fact for epilepsy. Yes, I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 30. I didn't tell anyone because I was afraid of the stigma. I was very aggressive in my business life. I was ambitious, and I didn't want anyone to think that I wasn't capable. And so 2010, reached out to Epilepsy Canada, had a successful career in the high-tech industry, wanted to help out, and I ended up here.
Yeah.
So I took on an interim role as president in 2011, and 2018 I'm still here. So it's great. The other effects, so personally, I'm beginning to suffer the long-term side effects of being on a drug. And some of that is, and I'm seeing a neurologist in the next few weeks, but I've had balance issues lately, so long-term effect from Dilantin. I'm getting more anxious, so I'm finding at times now that in a critical situation I react too strongly.
Yeah.
And I'm very concerned about that, and my people around me close are concerned as well. So I've got to check that. So I'm going to see my neurologist really soon to figure out if I can change meds, because this one, after 35 years, is really beginning to affect my ability to live my life normally.
For people watching this from the educational side of it, and I know we're just scratching the surface on this, when you were first diagnosed at age 30, is there something you saw or noticed, or now that you do have it and you have had them in the past, is there situations where you know you're about to have a seizure or anything like that, or any kind of red lights that go on in your brain saying this isn't right, this is what's happening right now? Yeah,
so for me, I had a Nora, and I had a dream-like aura. It was like a deja vu dream. So I would have, it was kind of a nightmare that would onset, and I'd have about 30 to 60 seconds to get to a floor to lie down because I knew something was happening.
Yeah.
I would try and battle it. I would try and move it out of my brain, but on most cases I couldn't. So I was fortunate to have that aura so I could react and take precautions. In addition, a number of years ago I smelt burnt toast. Sitting watching TV at 10 o'clock at night, on my own, and suddenly I had this overwhelming smell of burnt toast. That condition that happens for people who may have are going to have a seizure or may have a stroke, actually. That's the same kind of indication. I had neither. I went through that, passed through it, and didn't have a seizure, but those are the telling signs. So you become very aware of your body, your mind, and what's happening around you.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about the side effects. I mean, you're our friend,
yeah.
And it's hard to hear that. And I can only imagine what it's like for, the significant others in your life and or your family, knowing that you've done the right thing. It was diagnosed. You're taking the medication that was needed at the time, and now the medication has its own side effects to
Right.
it. So, boy, I sure hope that is resolved. And again, I think these are some of the things that, as Dave and I have decided, this is really where we want to be with you guys. It comes at a price, and the price, I think, sometimes is those feelings,
Right.
is the concern for people like yourself and for Jay and for his son. But if you're watching this and you have epilepsy in your family, this is what you may have been dealing with for a very, very, very long time. But for Dave and myself, it's relatively new, so it's a little jarring to hear that. I will say that, but it's the reason that we're here today. Trying to get some money in that will at some point even just address those symptoms, and maybe there could be an end to epilepsy, but if there isn't, at least we can, in terms of research, find ways to make those that have it, their life easier.
Yes, that's true, and our money is solely dedicated to research. And this past year, we wrote a check for $214,000 to 4 key researchers in Canada. One in Toronto, Dr. Peter Carlin, renowned neurologist downtown, and 3 in Montreal. It just happened to be Montreal this year, and all 3 of them were innovative research projects that were on the edge, that are targeted at finding a cure. One of them is to look at, is there a basis for understanding a SUDEP? So SUDEP is the sudden unexplained death from epilepsy. As I said, 2% will die. Jay would want me to talk about Leonard Allen. So Leonard Allen is now in the family, and Leonard has got another campaign to take 14 people up to Mount Kilimanjaro in August, and is raising money for his sister, Kim. So it's called Kim's Climb, and Kim died 24 years ago. And so still today, that has overwhelmingly been a side effect of their family. And Leonard, after watching Aiden's Drive last year and following us on the internet, said he had to come and do something and put together this climb to Mount Kilimanjaro for his sister, who passed away 24 years ago, and they're still not over it. So
I did see that, I think either an email that I received. Did I see that Philip is going to do this?
no,
Because I thought Philip's not a young man.
no, Philip's doing something.
Philip was not drafted by the New York Giants.
Philip's doing something even sillier. We have an individual who's doing a skydiving event in Bering, and Phil's going to jump out of a plane.
That's what it was.
So good for Phil.
Yeah. While we know him, I got to be honest. I might be taking a bet on that one, Dave. What do you think?
And-
Is there an over/under on that?
And besides that, Phil just had knee surgery this past winter, and so I could just see his leg buckling as he lands. I'm not going to be there to watch that event.
No, I don't think so either. Gary, thanks so much for joining us here on Raw Mike Richards. It's a pleasure being here. And in fact, when we come back on the other side, we're going to talk to someone who is helping us today on behalf of Hockley Valley. So we'll find out more about the resort itself. Thanks so much, Gary.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary.
Welcome back, RawMikeRichards.com, on location at Hockley Valley. We're going to talk to Ken Murray from the resort to tell you exactly just what you can expect here, because as beautiful as this is behind us, there is an entire resort that is like this, once again, in support of Epilepsy Canada, and Aiden's Drive is the name of the tournament. Before we do that, though, we saw yesterday, and we got a lot of response, not only on our website itself, but of course Raw Mike Richards is now heard in Calgary on Rogers Sportsnet Fan 960. And once again, the guy burning his jersey, Liam McGuire, chipped in. Donald Rosner, our good friend in New York, who offered
Donnie Ross.
free bagels from Boss Bagel for the rest of John Tavares' life should he have stayed in New York. And that was a real interesting sort of cross-section of what people thought, including that guy's statement that how dare that number 1 pick not stay for a lifetime with that team, that being the Islanders.
Yeah, and he talked about how certain players will sit there and spend their whole career. So I thought, okay, well, what is that actual percentage when you think of some of the players? So I actually had to check it out myself. You look back at it, it's a lot of the older type players when there was the Regional 6. When they expanded to 21 teams, what I grew up, and you look at it with guys like George Armstrong, Jean Beliveau, Mike Bossy, you're talking about heroes that have been retired for 20, 30, 40 years. Yeah. You get more into this year's mainstream. People will know Bobby Clark of the 70s, one of the great captains, a Manitoba boy, of course. Ken Danico, Pavel Datsyuk, and Eric Daze with the Chicago Blackhawks. Shane Doan, because he was drafted by Winnipeg State in the organization, guys like that. But you look throughout, like a Ron Greshner, Craig Hartsburg, Milan Hayduk, Thomas Holmstrom, players like that. More recently, Mario Lemieux, but even Lemieux retired before the 2000 season. You sit there and you go, okay, well, in the course of an NHL season, there will be anywhere between 700 and 750 players per year, per league, and so forth. When you break down the numbers and you see some of the examples, which there have been a lot, but you have to consider the NHL's been around for 100 years, it maybe makes up 3.5% of NHLers will stick with your team. So the argument of he should have retired an Islander is absolutely asinine. I don't think there's too many players in today's NHL. I even go one step forward. Yesterday I said Austin Matthews. Today I'll say a different name. Sidney Crosby will not retire a Pittsburgh Penguin and everything said and done, because by the end of it...
You're just trying to make
the
whole hockey world mad.
I'm just saying. By the end of it, if I was betting money right now, Sidney Crosby will be wearing a Montreal Canadiens jersey at some point of his NHL career because of where his dad played and because of what the family has to do with the Canadiens and so forth. Will he go there anytime soon? Absolutely not. Will he play with the Montreal Canadiens when everything's retired, said and done, and you hang his jerseys? There will be Sidney Crosby 87 Montreal Canadian jerseys out there. Mark my words on that. I'm just giving you some insight.
Wow. That was another episode of What Does Dave Think?
Good episode. Sponsored by Canada Pure.
Brought to you by
the makers of the best flavored water in Canada, and it's also pure.
As John Wells would say during the CFL game, brought to you by Canada Pure. Why? Because it's purely Canadian. Dave? Now we'd like to go to Ken Murray. That's also a good hockey name, too, don't you think?
It sounds like a tough winger or something, or a big defenseman on the team.
Winnipeg goal scored by number 45, Ken Murray.
Interesting number, too.
And little throwback in voice as well. Ken, great to be here, Hockley Valley. Just curious, how long have you worked at the resort?
So I'm actually very fortunate to be have recently joined the company. I moved out here February 27th. I'm returning back to Ontario, which is kind of where my homeland is, so it's great to join this amazing facility.
Kind of like John Tavares,
return home.
Yeah.
Return home, absolutely.
I've often heard at the resort that Ken Murray is the John Tavares of the hotel industry. So where were you before? Just curious. Where did you come back
recently
from?
I just came from Nova Scotia, but I've lived and worked in British Columbia and Alberta as well, so kind of across this country and internationally as well. So.
Well, I would say Dave's worked across the country as well, including Alberta with myself. I spent some time out there, and I've seen the gorgeous resorts, certainly in the Rockies, that you can work at. And the fact that you've chosen to come back here, I get it, because it really is that beautiful. So for those watching for the first time or hearing about Hockley Valley, it's in Mono County.
Correct.
But basically, we're saying sort of people will need to know: is it Caledon? Is it Orangeville? How would you describe it for those coming north of the city?
Well, we're 45 minutes north of Toronto, so a real quick jaunt out. You don't need to travel necessarily out for a whole weekend if you want to go for a quick day of golf, or in the wintertime hit the slopes. It's quick and convenient. But we're really just about 7 minutes from Orangeville is the best way. Right off of Highway 10. Easy to access, easy to get to, and once you are here, there's a ton of things to do. As you mentioned earlier, the Adamo Estate Winery, an incredible winery in the middle of where people said we shouldn't have wine. And the vision of Mr. Adamo in creating this experience and the quality of the products we produce are phenomenal. I mean, world-class, award-winning, incredible views, great location for events as well.
Well, that's interesting that not to be too wine nerdy or too wine geeky. And again, I'm not being Matthew Cause because nobody wants to be Matthew Cause. No. But I'm curious why they would. See, you actually have appellation here. You actually have the ability to grow where, you know, you can get a difference between the sun in the day and maybe cooler night air. Like, I mean, there are certain grapes that actually I would think would do quite well. What is the Would you know the best-selling wine in terms of its varietal? Do you know which?
Pinot Noirs are what we're most known for here, but we are creating some award-winning Chardonnays as well. We, again, being up in the north, the climate's not as warm as you get in Niagara, of course, but we actually do obtain grapes from the Niagara region from special vintners like the Lowrys, who allow us the privilege of actually creating a wine with some of their grapes as well. But with our vineyards, we have 18 acres, and we do actually, because of the cold climates, we actually wrap those rows in those vines in the wintertime to protect them, because we are a colder environment.
Ken, as far as other things that are available, as he said, we'll be golfing today, and of course, you can stay. If you the weekend stay, you see the pool behind us right now. I'm sure there are golf packages for those that'd be interested in doing that.
Absolutely. We do have weekday packages as well as weekends, different day rates. Triple Bogey Tuesdays is a great one on Tuesdays for a little bit of a discount.
Coach Frank hits a lot of triple bogeys, so he might be here on Tuesday.
Excellent.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's terrible. Sorry. I just know we're piling on Coach Frank.
Well, he can always console himself with a good local triple bogey brew beer in the bar of Babo as well. So there we go.
Right.
Yeah.
What's busier, Ken? I mean, this may not be fair, but what's busier, summer or winter at Hockley?
You know, the great thing about an all-season resort is you are busy all seasons round. We have a great corporate base holding us through the weeks, and of course on weekends, again, we have golf in the summer, but of course the ski slopes. We have 15 runs, a couple are triple Black Diamond. They're great runs. They're a little short, but they're great. And then, of course, we have a spa that's busy year-round that just doesn't stop. So phenomenal property in all seasons, all the time.
So when you think of seasonal activities, it's year-round. So if you're thinking of Christmas time, I know that there have been certain packages over the year where it's you can celebrate with your family because there are more rooms here than I thought, and they look very. Sort of refurbished, like they're very modern looking, they're very up to date.
We have 104 rooms and suites right now, and of course there are different levels, different tiers. We have our bi-level suites, our presidential suites, so there's a good variety of mix throughout the property.
Ken, thanks so much for hosting this once again. I think it was never in doubt. I mean, when I asked Jay, I said, please tell me that you're coming back to Hockley Valley because this was money that was so great. And, of course, you've signed a relatively long-term contract with Epilepsy Canada and Aiden's Drive, which we think is the smartest thing they could have done because we really haven't had a better day. It's the reason why Dave and I are here today, and Hockley Valley is a big reason, a big part of this tournament success. So, Ken, thanks so much for joining us here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and happy to support. Thanks.
That is Ken Murray. You are the
Director of Operations.
So the Commandant, the Czar, is any other names that you like to...
No,
are there nicknames
none.
that people call you when you're not looking? No, there might be.
I kind of like Czar. I think that's good.
I don't think so.
Fantastic. So we will be out for the day of golf. Myself, Dave, Yard Dog is going to be with us, Coach Frank. And at the end of it, we have the Marvelous Night. Then there is some silent auction stuff. There's
massive table, too. There's countless autographed NHL authentic jerseys. I just saw Johnny Bauer signed goal stick from Blay Tape, and you know what? The sponsor's been tremendous. This is going to be a fantastic tournament, and I dare say the tournament of the summer. And we look forward to a pretty good day.
Yeah, here's just some of it. You've probably seen it, and of course at Christmas time, if you're a subscriber to the website, there you go. That's the Raw Mike Richards. How's that look there, Devin? Is that? Oh yeah, it's a great job. Someone said, I don't know who that is, but this thing looks fantastic. Who's the guy? I said, he's a high-end fashion model. You can't afford him. Don't worry about it. He's not for you. Well, he could be. I think, Dave, everything we do is for sale, isn't it?
I think it's very for sale, absolutely. You give us a prize, we'll figure it out.
Vicky's face would look awesome on here. Okay. By the way, that's Dave's sister-in-law, who happens to be his wife's twin.
That's kind of
Yeah, people are like, what are you saying? We say a lot, as always. So have yourself a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. This show.
And by the way, speaking of tomorrow's show, on the show in studio, we have a race driver that will be in the Molson Indy. We'll tell you who that is tomorrow morning, but a driver from the Molson Indy will be in studio with us tomorrow.
Oh, he's a great driver with lots of speed, Davey.
I don't know. Jackie Stewart.
No, it's not Dave Jackie Stewart, yeah. Which would be awkward because he's been dead for about 20 years.
That is true.
Yeah.
Clean up aisle 5.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, Hockley Valley. Thank you, Epilepsy Canada. And when we see you tomorrow, courtesy of also our friends Blade Tape and Canada Pure, we'll have an update on just how much money was raised. They're at $89,000 already, and we haven't started because they're just getting started. Have yourself a great day.
What? We just become best friends? Yep.